Many of you are writing about your childhood, and here's a classic storyline or scene from childhood, and that is the first day at a new school. So I'm sure we can all relate to this. I wanted to share this paragraph because there's a bit of a focus here on some details that maybe aren't that important and can be combined and tightened up. And we always want to make our paragraphs tighter, more focused, so it's easier for the reader to get through them. So I'm just going to run through this paragraph, make a few edits, and then explain how this functions better once those edits are made. Now, the first sentence, I would just take this out. I'm not a big fan of starting sentences with "it was." On my 5th day in town, I joined 4th grade in a new school called the Huntington Ridge. So we get a location, we get the details of the grade. We already know this is a young person, probably 8 or 9 years old at this point. Then the author says, in the morning, I felt excited. You got to show this. Remember the show don't tell mantra. Expand that. Just what does that look like physically to be excited? If you can remember back to your childhood, what would the first day of school, excitement, how would it manifest itself in your face, your body, and so on? Now it says all of my excitement faded away when I entered. It isn't clear from this story why that is. It would have to be explained later, but right there it's adding a bit of confusion, so I would totally remove that. We don't want to confuse the reader about why you go from being excited to losing that excitement just by walking in. Now, from the principal's office, I was told to walk to class 4B, so the student is trying to find the classroom. Now, it says my new teacher was called Mrs. Caravello. I assume that detail came from the principal's office or something. Whether we need that here, I'm not so sure. Eventually, once the student gets to the classroom, I think we'll need to know the teacher's name, but I would probably just remove that. I walked through the hallway. The walls of the hallway were painted white and black. I think those two sentences can be combined. So we can go with, I walked through the white and black halls. So there, combine those two. There really wasn't a reason to have one sentence talking about walking through the hallways and another about the color of the hallways. It's great to have these visual details. We need to be able to see what you saw back then in 4th grade, but we don't necessarily need to devote a whole sentence to the color of the walls of the school, right? So there's a fine line there between getting in that visual detail and lingering on it unnecessarily. Then we have this sentence, a painting made by students hung on the walls. I don't know how this author knew that it was made by students or one student. Describe it, show it. Was it an abstract piece or whatever? Was it signed by a bunch of students? Get that detail in there because I'm not sure that you would actually know that it was made by students or one student. I would just say a student painting hung on the walls, or maybe on the wall there. Let's change that. And then at the end, it talks about the class numbers were written on the door for every classroom. From what I remember of the original story or original scene, this student has trouble finding class 4B. So I think that's why the class numbers is important to the story. I don't know if they're written on the door. They were on the door for or on every class door. So there you can see how I would edit this down a little, just to make it a little tighter, a little smoother, to not linger on some details, to move things faster. Remember, you always want to get your reader through your sentences as quickly as possible. You don't want them stopping on unnecessary detail or being focused on things that are not that important to the story. But that's a good example of tightening up during the revision process.